My mother-in-law kept joking that I wasn't good enough for her son until I played the recording of what she really said about me at his bachelor party. Carol started the moment Ethan introduced me, sweet little comments wrapped in poison. "Oh, she's interesting," she'd say, looking me up and down. "I'm sure she'll grow on us," always with that smile that never reached her eyes. For 2 years, I endured her passive-aggressive masterpiece. At family dinners, she'd ask about my little job at the nonprofit while discussing her friends' daughters who were doctors and lawyers. She'd comment on my clothes, my hair, my accent. "You have such a unique way of speaking, Olivia." Very authentic. When Ethan proposed, she hugged me and whispered, "I hope you know what you're getting into, dear." The worst part, Ethan thought it was harmless. "She's just protective," he'd say. "She jokes with everyone." But I noticed she didn't joke with his brother's wife the same way. Sarah got compliments on her cooking, her decorator sense, her wonderful contribution to the family. I got backhanded comments about being so different from what we're used to. Let me paint you a picture of what 2 years with Carol looked like. At our first family barbecue, I brought my grandmother's famous potato salad, the recipe that had won 3 county fair blue ribbons. I watched nervously as everyone tried it, hoping to make a good impression. The compliments flowed freely until Carol took a bite. "Interesting flavor profile," she said, setting down her fork after one taste. "Very regional. I suppose some people prefer heavier dishes." Then she loudly announced that she'd made a lighter option for those watching their figures, gesturing to her quinoa salad that looked like rabbit food. Later, I overheard her telling her sister. I tried to be polite about her potato salad, but honestly, Susan, it was swimming in mayonnaise. You can tell she's not used to entertaining refined palates. My grandmother's blue ribbon recipe, dismissed as peasant food. At Ethan's cousin's wedding, I wore a navy dress I'd saved for months to buy. It was elegant, appropriate, and I felt beautiful in it. Carol arrived wearing an almost identical dress in black. "How funny," she said, looking me up and down. "We almost match, though. I suppose navy is more youthful." I was 26, she was 52. "I hope people don't think we coordinated." How embarrassing that would be. She spent the entire reception making comments about our twin outfits, each one designed to emphasize that I'd somehow copied her, despite having bought my dress weeks earlier. The grocery store incident was particularly humiliating. I'd run into Carol at the upscale market downtown, and she immediately started examining my cart contents like a health inspector. "Oh my," she said loudly, picking up a box of hamburger helper. "How practical. I suppose not everyone has time for made-from-scratch meals." She said this while other shoppers were clearly listening. Then she proceeded to give me a lecture about nutrition and the importance of setting proper examples for future children, all while her own cart was full of expensive pre-made meals from the deli counter. "It's really about priorities," she concluded loud enough for half the produce section to hear. "Some people prioritize convenience over quality." I wanted to disappear into the floor. Instead, I smiled and said, "You're absolutely right. Ethan loves my homemade mac and cheese, but sometimes after working a 12-hour day managing housing programs for homeless families, I need shortcuts." Her face fell slightly when I mentioned my actual job responsibilities, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, dear. Everyone does their best." The Christmas incident should have been my wake-up call. I spent weeks making homemade gifts for everyone. Hand-knitted scarves, photo albums filled with family memories, personalized ornaments with each person's name carefully painted in gold script. I'd worked evenings and weekends for 2 months, putting love and care into every stitch and brushstroke. Carol opened hers last, held up the scarf I'd worked on for months, a beautiful cable knit in her favorite color, and said, "How crafty. I'll have to find somewhere special to put this." The way she said crafty made it sound like a disease. But when Sarah brought store-bought candles from Bath and Body Works, Carol gushed about her impeccable taste and thoughtfulness. I watched my handmade gift get shoved aside, while everyone admired Sarah's $20 impulse purchase from the mall. That night, Ethan found me crying in the bathroom. "She hated it." I sobbed. "I worked so hard and she hated it." "She didn't hate it," he insisted. "She said it was crafty." "That's a compliment, Ethan." She made it sound like I'd given her a macaroni necklace. "You're being too sensitive," he said, rubbing my back. Mom appreciates handmade things. She kept all my childhood art projects. What he didn't see was Carol discreetly slipping my scarf into a donation bag the next morning. I watched from the kitchen window as she carried it to her car with the other unwanted Christmas items. The pattern continued relentlessly. At Ethan's birthday dinner, I suggested a restaurant that served his favorite cuisine. Carol immediately countered with a suggestion for somewhere more sophisticated. Ethiopian food is so adventurous, she said, wrinkling her nose. But perhaps we should go somewhere with broader appeal. Not everyone is comfortable with exotic flavors. We ended up at her stuffy country club, where I sat through 3 courses of bland food, while she regaled the table with stories about her friends' children and their impressive careers. Brenda's daughter just made partner at her law firm, she announced, cutting her overpriced chicken breast. And Susan's son is completing his residency in cardiology. It's so wonderful when young people have ambitious goals. She looked directly at me. Of course, not everyone needs to be a high achiever. The world needs support staff too. Support staff. I managed a team of 12 people and had increased our nonprofit's funding by 40% in 2 years. But to Carol, I was support staff. The apartment hunting expedition was another nightmare. Ethan and I were looking for our first place together, and Carol insisted on helping. She dismissed every property we liked as too small, or in a questionable neighborhood, or lacking character. When we found a beautiful Victorian apartment that we both loved, Carol walked through once and pronounced it charming in a rustic way. Very authentic, she said, examining the original hardwood floors with disdain. I suppose some people prefer older properties, though the maintenance costs must be astronomical. She spent the rest of the viewing pointing out every minor flaw. A tiny crack in the bathroom tile, a window that stuck slightly, paint that was obviously cheap quality. By the time we left, I felt embarrassed for having loved it. Maybe we should keep looking, Ethan said uncertainly. That night, I called the landlord and put down a deposit. It was our apartment, our choice, and I wasn't letting Carol's poison ruin something beautiful for us. When we moved in, Carol's housewarming gift was a set of coasters with care instructions, emphasizing how easily water rings could damage vintage furniture. The message was clear. You're too careless for nice things. But the cruelest cut came during my promotion celebration. I'd worked for 3 years to become program director, competing against candidates with master's degrees when I only had my bachelor's. When I got the job, Ethan was ecstatic. He suggested dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town to celebrate. Carol's response, "How nice that they're giving you more responsibilities. I hope the extra workload won't interfere with your home life." Career women often struggle with balance. At dinner, she spent the entire evening talking about work-life balance and how some women prioritize careers over family. She shared statistics about divorce rates among working couples and stories about friends whose marriages had suffered when wives became too focused on work. Of course, Olivia's situation is different, she concluded with false sincerity. Her job is more of a calling than a career. Social work is so admirable, even if it's not financially rewarding. I wasn't a social worker. I was a program director at a nonprofit that provided housing assistance to homeless families. But to Carol, anything that helped people was social work. And anything that didn't make massive profits was worthless. The engagement party she threw for us was another exercise in subtle humiliation. She invited all her friends and none of mine, creating a guest list that made me feel like an outsider at my own celebration. "I thought it would be nice to introduce you to our circle," she explained when I asked about the one-sided guest list. "These are the people you'll need to know as Ethan's wife." The entire evening was a performance where I was both the star and the audience. Carol introduced me to person after person with the same script. "This is Olivia, Ethan's fiancée. She works with disadvantaged people. It's very noble work." Every introduction carried the same subtle message. She's not one of us, but we're being gracious about it. When people asked about my work, Carol would interrupt before I could answer properly. "She helps people find housing," she'd say quickly as if the details were too boring or inappropriate for a polite conversation. One woman, clearly confused, asked, "Are you a real estate agent?" Before I could clarify, Carol jumped in. "Oh no. It's more charitable work. Very admirable, really." I spent the entire party feeling like a charity case myself, displayed for her friends' approval like a rescue puppy she'd adopted. The breaking point came during wedding planning. We'd been engaged for 6 months, and every decision became a battle. Carol had opinions about everything. The venue was too casual, the flowers were too simple, the menu wasn't sophisticated enough. When we chose a local photographer whose work we loved, Carol brought out portfolios from award-winning professionals who charged 3 times as much. I understand budget is a concern, she said with false sympathy, but your wedding photos are forever. You don't want to look back and regret cutting corners on something so important. The photographer we chosen had shot 3 of our friends' weddings beautifully, but Carol made us second-guess everything with her subtle undermining. She questioned our choice of DJ, our decision to have a buffet instead of plated dinner, even our selection of wedding favors. Nothing was good enough, sophisticated enough, or appropriate enough for a wedding of this caliber. I just want everything to be perfect for you, she'd say with that fake, concerned smile. This is such an important day, and first impressions matter so much, the rehearsal dinner venue became her nuclear option. She suggested we have it at her country club, which would have cost more than our entire wedding budget. Of course, we'll need to be careful about the guest list, she said delicately. Some venues have standards, she looked directly at me. But I'm sure we can work something out. When I asked what she meant, she smiled sweetly. Nothing, dear. Just that your family might feel more comfortable somewhere, less formal. The club can be intimidating for people who aren't used to that level of service. That's when I understood. She wasn't just insulting me anymore. She was going after my family. My parents, who had worked their entire lives to provide for us. My sister, who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. My brother, who ran his own successful business. What exactly are you implying about my family? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Oh, nothing at all, she backpedaled quickly. I just think they might prefer somewhere more relaxed, somewhere they can be themselves without worrying about protocol. Protocol as if my family were barbarians who couldn't handle using the correct fork. That night, I called my mom, Nancy, crying. Maybe I'm not cut out for this family, I said. Maybe I should just call off the wedding. Mom, who'd raised 3 kids while working double shifts, as a nurse, listened quietly to my breakdown. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Olivia, she finally said, her voice firm, you are good enough for any family on this earth. Your father, David, and I raised you to be kind, hardworking, and honest. If that's not enough for them, that's their failing, not yours. But what if Ethan starts to see me the way she does? Then he's not the man you think he is. But honey, you can't spend your whole life trying to prove your worth to someone who's already decided you're worthless. That's not a battle you can win. Her words stayed with me for days. I started paying closer attention to how Carol treated other people. The condescending way she spoke to servers, the dismissive comments about neighbors who weren't wealthy enough. The careful way she curated her social media to present a perfect image. I realized something important. Carol's problem wasn't with me specifically. It was with anyone she perceived as beneath her social status. I just happened to be dating her son. 3 weeks before our wedding, I was picking up decorations from Carol's house when I heard voices in the backyard. Ethan's bachelor party was that night, and some guys had arrived early to help set up the tent and bar. I was about to announce myself when I heard my name. I still can't believe Ethan's marrying that girl. Carol's voice carried clearly through the screen door. My stomach dropped. I pulled out my phone and hit record. My hands already shaking. She's so beneath him. Carol continued, her voice dripping with disdain. No class, no breeding. Her family's trailer trash, and it shows. I've been trying to get him to see it, but he's blinded by whatever spell she's cast. Trailer trash. My parents, David and Nancy, who owned their own home and had been married for 28 years. My family, who had never asked for anything from anyone. What are you going to do? Asked a voice I recognized as Ethan's uncle. Wait and see. Girls like that always show their true colors eventually. She'll probably get pregnant immediately to trap him, then take half of everything in the divorce. Mark my words. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone, but I kept recording. The wedding's going to be a disaster. Did you see her dress? Looks like something from a discount store. And don't get me started on her family. I had to uninvite half the people I wanted there to make room for her people. Her people? Ethan's cousin laughed. You mean the nurse mother, Nancy, and the mechanic father, David. How tragic. Exactly. And that sister of hers with all the tattoos. I specifically asked them to dress appropriately, but you know how those types are. No sense of occasion. I felt like I was going to vomit. Those types. My sister's tattoos were memorial pieces for the patients she'd lost when she was deployed as an army medic in Afghanistan. She'd shown them to Carol once, explaining the meaning behind each one. Carol had nodded politely and changed the subject immediately. Have you talked to Ethan about this? His uncle asked. Oh, constantly, but he's stubborn. He thinks he's in love. I keep hoping he'll come to his senses, but the wedding's in 3 weeks. I'm running out of time. What if you just told him how you really feel? Carol laughed. A cold, calculating sound that made my skin crawl. Please. Ethan would never forgive me. No, I have to be smarter than that. I'll play the loving mother-in-law. Document every mistake she makes every time she embarrasses the family. Eventually, he'll see what I see. And when he does, I'll be there to help him through the divorce. She was planning my marriage's failure before it even began. The prenup will help, she continued. I made sure Ethan's lawyer included clauses about lifestyle maintenance and social expectations. If she steps out of line or fails to integrate properly with the family, she gets nothing. There was no prenup. We discussed it and decided against it. But apparently Carol had other plans. You're assuming she'll give you ammunition. Ethan's cousin pointed out. Oh, she will. People like her always do. They can't help themselves. Give it 6 months, and she'll do something embarrassing at a company function or family event. She'll wear the wrong thing, say something inappropriate, show her true colors, and I'll be there to document every moment. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes. She discussed my appearance in clinical detail, comparing me unfavorably to Ethan's ex-girlfriends from better families. She speculated about my motives for marrying him, suggesting I was either a gold digger or desperate for social advancement. At least his other girlfriends had some breeding, she said. Remember Emily. Her father was a judge, and Chloe's family had that beautiful estate in Connecticut. But this one, her father David, fixes cars for a living. Maybe that's what Ethan likes about her. Suggested someone I didn't recognize. Please, Carol scoffed. Ethan's going through a phase. He thinks he's being noble, saving some poor girl from her circumstances. But reality will set in eventually when she starts demanding expensive things. When she gets pregnant and lets herself go, when her family expects handouts, he'll see her for what she really is. The worst part was hearing her strategize ways to sabotage my marriage. She'd already spoken to Ethan's boss about the importance of appropriate spouses at company events. She'd made subtle comments to his friends about how different I was from his usual type. She was systematically poisoning every relationship in his life against me. I've been planting seeds everywhere, she admitted. Little comments about her background, her education, her family's circumstances. Nothing traceable back to me, of course. But people notice these things. They'll be watching for signs that she doesn't belong. When the recording ended at 23 minutes, I sat in my car for an hour, shaking and crying. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Ethan and play it for him immediately. But I knew I needed to be smart about this. Carol was right about one thing. She was calculating and strategic. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be prepared. I spent the next 2 days making copies of the recording and saving them in multiple places. Cloud storage, email, USB drives. I transcribed every word, timestamping each comment. I researched recording laws to make sure I hadn't done anything illegal. I even consulted with a lawyer friend about my options. Most importantly, I made a decision about what I wanted to accomplish. I could use this recording to hurt Carol, to expose her cruelty to everyone she knew. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. I wanted justice, not revenge. The bridal shower was that weekend. Carol had insisted on hosting it at her house, inviting all her friends and family members. The guest list read like a who's who of the local social scene. Country club wives, charity board members, and family friends who'd known Ethan since childhood. I arrived early to help set up, playing the beautiful daughter-in-law one last time. "Oh, Olivia, you're here," she said, air kissing my cheek with practiced affection. I was just telling Susan about your interesting choice of flowers for the wedding. Daisies are so rustic. Susan, one of her country club friends, smiled tightly. How unique. I smiled back sweetly. Actually, daisies were Ethan's grandmother's favorite flower. He specifically requested them to honor her memory. I thought it was incredibly touching that he wanted to include her in our special day. Carol's face faltered for just a moment before she recovered. Of course, dear. How thoughtful of you to remember, but I caught the flash of irritation in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to have a meaningful reason for my choice, and my response made her comment look petty and inappropriate. The shower proceeded exactly as I expected. Carol held court in her perfectly decorated living room, making subtle digs disguised as loving concern. I hope Olivia knows what she's getting into, being part of such a close family. We have very high standards. The other women tittered politely, while my friends and family sat uncomfortably in the circle of chairs. When we played the How Well Do You Know the Bride game, Carol answered every question about me incorrectly despite having known me for 2 years. She got my job title wrong, my college major wrong, even my favorite color wrong. But she answered with such confidence that several guests looked confused. I thought Olivia worked in social services. One woman said hesitantly, "Oh, it's all the same thing, really." Carol waved dismissively, helping people, you know. Very admirable, even if it's not particularly substantial. My college roommate, Ashley, cleared her throat. Actually, Olivia is a program director. She manages housing assistance programs for homeless families. Last year, her team helped over 300 families find permanent housing. Carol's smile tightened. Of course, how lovely. The gift opening was its own special torture. Every present I received came with commentary from Carol about its appropriateness or practicality. When my aunt gave me a beautiful set of kitchen towels, Carol examined them closely. Cotton blend, she announced to the room. Very economical, though I suppose not everyone needs Egyptian cotton for everyday use. When Ethan's cousin gave me a cookbook, Carol flipped through it with obvious disdain. Comfort food recipes, she said with a forced smile. How homey. I'll have to give you some of my lighter options once you're married. Ethan's always been careful about his figure. After the gifts were opened, and Carol had made subtle comments about the appropriateness of each one, we moved to the dining room for lunch. The conversation flowed around me as the women discussed their children's accomplishments, their husbands' business dealings, and their various charitable commitments. I listened as Carol bragged about Ethan's career prospects, his position at the firm, his bright future. She spoke about him like a prize bull at auction, emphasizing his value while carefully avoiding any mention of his happiness or personal fulfillment. Ethan's always been destined for great things, she announced, cutting her salmon with precise movements. The partners at his firm have already hinted at fast-tracking him to senior associate. Of course, having the right support system at home is crucial for that kind of advancement. She looked at me meaningfully. Wives can either be assets or complications. Thankfully, I raised Ethan to understand the importance of making strategic choices. Strategic choices. That's what I was to her. A poor strategic choice that needed to be corrected. One of her friends, obviously picking up on the subtext, asked about our honeymoon plans. Before I could answer, Carol jumped in. They're doing something very adventurous, a camping trip, I believe. Very outdoorsy. She said this like we were planning to live in mud huts. Actually, I said calmly, we're going to New Zealand for 2 weeks. Ethan's always wanted to see the fjords, and I've dreamed of visiting Hobbiton since I was a kid. Several women perked up with interest. How wonderful, said Susan. New Zealand is supposed to be absolutely gorgeous. Carol's jaw tightened. Of course, I must have been thinking of someone else's plans, but I caught the way she glanced at her phone, probably already composing a text to someone about how I'd corrected her in front of her friends. After lunch, we moved to the living room for coffee and final gift opening. I'd been saving my performance for this moment when everyone was relaxed and comfortable. I wanted to thank everyone for coming today, I said, standing up with my coffee cup in hand. It means so much to have the support of family and friends as Ethan and I start our life together. Carol beamed at me from her position on the sofa. Oh, you're so welcome, dear. We're just thrilled to be welcoming you into our family. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about, I continued, setting down my cup and pulling out my phone. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be part of a family, about honesty, respect, and acceptance. The room grew quiet. I could see Ethan's female cousins exchanging glances, sensing that something was about to happen. 3 days ago, I was at Carol's house picking up decorations when I overheard a conversation. I think everyone should hear what was really said about me and my family. Carol's face went white. She started to stand up. Olivia, I don't think this is appropriate. You're right, I said calmly. It's not appropriate, but it happened anyway. I pressed play, and Carol's voice filled the room crystal clear. She's so beneath him. No class, no breeding, her family's trailer trash, and it shows. The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. I watched as 24 women processed what they just heard, their faces showing everything from shock to horror to embarrassment. I let the recording play for a full minute through the comments about my family being trailer trash, my dress looking cheap, and my people being inappropriate for the country club. When I paused it, the silence stretched uncomfortably. There's 22 more minutes, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Would you like me to continue? Carol stood up shakily, her face cycling through several emotions. Denial, anger, fear, and finally desperate damage control. That's taken out of context, she stammered. I was just venting. Everyone vents sometimes. I didn't mean you didn't mean to call my mother, Nancy, trailer trash. I interrupted. The woman who worked double shifts as a registered nurse to put 3 kids through college. The woman who's been married to my father, David, for 28 years and has never missed a single one of our school plays, graduations, or important moments. My voice was getting stronger, fueled by righteous anger. Or maybe you didn't mean to insult my father, David, the mechanic who built his own business from nothing and now employs 12 people. The man who taught me that hard work and integrity matter more than social status. Ethan's Aunt Susan was staring at Carol in horror. Carol, please tell me you didn't actually say those things. I pressed play again, letting them hear Carol's comments about my sister's tattoos and my family being those types of people. For the record, I said when I paused it again, my sister's tattoos are memorial pieces for the soldiers and patients she lost when she was deployed as an army medic in Afghanistan. She served 3 tours of duty and saved countless lives. Those tattoos represent her commitment to never forget the people she couldn't save. Several women gasped. One of them had a son in the military. And my dress, the one that supposedly looks like it came from a discount store. It cost $100 or $200 and came from the same bridal boutique where your niece bought her dress last year, Carol. I saved for 6 months to afford it because I wanted to look beautiful for your son on our wedding day. I could see some of the women doing the math, realizing that my dress had cost more than what many of them spent on their everyday wardrobes. But you know what the real truth is. I continued, my voice gaining power. None of that should matter. My family's income, my job, my background. None of it should determine whether I'm worthy of love and respect. I've spent 2 years trying to earn Carol's approval, changing everything about myself to fit into your world, and it was never going to be enough, was it? I looked directly at Carol, who was now sitting back down, tears streaming down her face. Because you never saw me as a person. You saw me as a threat to your control over Ethan. You saw me as someone beneath your social status, and that's all you were ever going to see. I pulled out printed copies of the full transcript and set them on the coffee table. I've made copies of the entire recording. 23 minutes of pure hatred, disguised as motherly concern. Ethan has heard every word. Your son, the one you claim to love and protect, now knows exactly what you think of the woman he chose to marry. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of Carol's quiet sobbing. Susan, who had been one of Carol's closest friends for over 20 years, stood up slowly. I think I need to leave, she said, her voice shaking with disappointment. Please don't, I said firmly. Stay, finish your coffee. Enjoy the rest of the shower. You came here to celebrate with me, and that's what we're going to do. I'm the one who's leaving. I gathered my gifts and my purse, then turned back to address the room one final time. To everyone who came here today to support me, thank you. Your presence means more than you know. To those of you who might be wondering if what you heard changes anything, it doesn't. I'm still the same person I was an hour ago. I still love Ethan with my whole heart, and I'm still going to marry him next weekend. I looked at Carol one last time, but I'm done pretending that your approval matters to me. I'm done shrinking myself to fit into your narrow definition of acceptable, and I'm done letting you poison my relationship with silent compliance. I walked toward the front door, then paused with my hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Carol, you're uninvited from the wedding. Security will have your photo, so don't bother showing up. As I walked to my car, I could hear the explosion of voices behind me. Some shocked, some supportive, some clearly taking sides. My phone started buzzing immediately with texts from the women who'd been there, but I ignored them all. I drove straight to Ethan's office and asked his secretary if I could see him. She took one look at my face and immediately buzzed him. "What's wrong?" he asked as soon as I walked into his office. I handed him my phone with the recording queued up. "Listen to this." "All of it?" I sat in the chair across from his desk and watched his face as he heard his mother's real opinion of me for the first time. By the end, he was pale and shaking. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew she could be difficult, but she's been planning the failure of our marriage since the day we got engaged." I said quietly, "She failed. She admitted to poisoning your friends and colleagues against me. She talked about documenting my mistake so she could help you through our divorce." Ethan put his head in his hands. "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." "You were protecting your mother," I said. "I understand that impulse, but I needed you to protect me too." We talked for 2 hours in his office about boundaries, about what our marriage would look like, about how we'd handle his family going forward. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. "She won't be at the wedding," Ethan said finally. "I'll call her tonight." "I already uninvited her," I admitted. "At the bridal shower in front of everyone." Ethan's eyes widened. "You played the recording at the bridal shower. Every word of it." For a moment, I thought he might be angry. Instead, he started to laugh, not with humor, but with something like admiration. "My God," he said. "You actually did it. You stood up to her publicly. She humiliated me publicly for 2 years." I said it seemed fair. The next few days were absolute chaos. Ethan's phone rang constantly with family members, wanting to know what was happening. Some sided with Carol, claiming I'd been vindictive and cruel to humiliate her publicly. Others supported me, saying it was about time someone stood up to her manipulative behavior. His cousin Jessica called me directly. "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to call her out." She said, "The way she treated my mother when she married into this family was awful, but no one ever had proof before." Ethan's Aunt Martha, Carol's sister-in-law, was less supportive. Family business should stay private. She lectured me over the phone. "What you did was cruel and unnecessary." Carol made some unfortunate comments, but destroying her reputation isn't the answer. "Unfortunate comments," I replied. She called my family trailer trash and strategized ways to end my marriage before it started. That goes a little beyond unfortunate. She was venting to friends. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're upset for 23 minutes in explicit detail. While planning specific actions to sabotage my relationship with her son, Martha was quiet for a moment. "Maybe you could have handled it more diplomatically." "I tried diplomacy for 2 years," I said. "It didn't work." Sometimes the only language bullies understand is public consequences. But the most important conversation was with my own family. When I called to tell them what had happened, my mother, Nancy, was quiet for a long moment. "I'm proud of you," she finally said. "That couldn't have been easy." I was terrified, I admitted, but I couldn't let her keep treating us like we were beneath her. "Your father, David, and I have been working our whole lives," Mom said. "We've never been ashamed of what we do or where we come from. If she can't see the value in that, that's her problem, not ours." My sister's reaction was more colorful. "I wish I could have been there," she said. "I would have loved to see her face when you pressed play." "It wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about accountability." "Sometimes they're the same thing," she replied. The wedding went on as planned, and despite the drama, or maybe because of it, it was beautiful. The guest list was smaller than we'd originally planned, but everyone who came was genuinely happy to be there. There was no tension, no subtle digs, no walking on eggshells. My family was there in full force, and for the first time in 2 years, they could just be themselves. My dad, David, walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. My sister gave a maid of honor speech that was funny and heartfelt and didn't require any diplomatic editing. My brother's kids ran around the reception with wild abandon, and nobody made comments about their volume or energy level. Ethan's father attended along with several family members who'd been appalled by Carol's behavior. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with people who actually wanted to celebrate our love story rather than endure it. During our first dance, Ethan whispered in my ear, "I love you exactly as you are. I'm sorry it took me so long to show you that." "We're showing each other now," I whispered back. "That's what matters." Carol didn't show up, but I spotted her car parked across the street during the ceremony. She sat there for the entire service, watching through the windshield as her son married the woman she'd tried so hard to drive away. Part of me felt sorry for her. She was missing one of the most important days of her son's life because of her own prejudice and pride. But mostly, I felt free. Free from the weight of her disapproval. Free from the constant criticism. Free from the exhausting effort of trying to be someone I wasn't. Our honeymoon in New Zealand was everything we dreamed of. We hiked through landscapes that looked like they belonged in fairy tales, explored cities that felt both familiar and exotic, and spent 2 weeks just being ourselves without any family drama or social expectations. On our last night, as we sat on the balcony of our hotel room overlooking the Bay of Islands, Ethan brought up his mother for the first time since we'd left. "Do you think she'll ever apologize?" he asked. I considered this carefully. Maybe, but not because she realizes she was wrong. Only if she decides she wants you in her life more than she wants to be right. And if she doesn't, then that's her choice. I said, "We can't force people to change, Ethan. We can only decide how we respond to their choices." 6 months later, Ethan and I bought our first house, that same Victorian apartment with the original hardwood floors that Carol had dismissed as too rustic. We hosted our first Thanksgiving dinner, and I made my grandmother's famous sweet potato casserole alongside Ethan's family's traditional green bean recipe. Ethan's father came along with the cousins and aunt who'd stood by us. Jessica brought her new boyfriend, and his uncle brought homemade wine. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and genuine warmth. Nobody mentioned Carol's absence, but her empty chair at the dining room table spoke volumes about the cost of choosing pride over relationships. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, Ethan's cousin Jessica pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "What you did at the bridal shower. It wasn't just brave. It was necessary. Carol has been the family bully for decades, and everyone was too scared to call her out." She went on to tell me stories I'd never heard before. How Carol had sabotaged her brother's first marriage by constantly criticizing his wife until the woman finally left. How she'd made Ethan's father choose between her and his own parents, ultimately destroying his relationship with his family. How she'd controlled and manipulated every relationship in Ethan's life since childhood. "You broke a cycle," Jessica said. "Ethan is the first person in this family to stand up to her and mean it. You gave him permission to choose his own happiness." That evening, as Ethan and I sat on our front porch watching the sunset, Carol called. Ethan answered and put her on speaker. We'd agreed on complete transparency going forward. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice bitter and cold. "You've destroyed our family." "No, Mom," Ethan replied quietly but firmly. "You did that when you decided to hate my wife before you even knew her. When you chose your own prejudices over my happiness, I was trying to protect you from what? From marrying someone who loves me unconditionally, someone who makes me laugh every day. Someone who comes from a family that actually knows how to love without conditions." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "She's changed you," Carol said finally, her voice full of accusation. "Yeah," Ethan said, looking at me with a smile. "She has. She's made me a better person. She's taught me that love shouldn't come with a checklist of requirements. She's shown me what it means to be accepted for who I am instead of who someone thinks I should be." "I gave you everything," Carol protested. "You gave me conditional love," Ethan corrected. "You gave me expectations and criticism disguised as care. You gave me the message that nothing I chose for myself would ever be good enough unless it met with your approval first." "That's not true." "Then name one thing I've ever chosen." "Girlfriend, career, apartment, hobby. Anything that you supported without trying to change or criticize. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. I can't talk to you when you're like this, she finally said. I'm like someone who's finally telling the truth, Ethan replied. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about your behavior, I'll be here. But I won't accept blame for standing up for my wife and my marriage. After she hung up, we sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars come out. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked, playing the recording, burning that bridge so completely. I thought about it for a long moment. No, some bridges need to be burned to protect what's on your side of them. Your mother made her choice about who I was before she ever got to know me. Nothing I could have done would have changed her mind, but now she's out of our lives completely. By her choice, I reminded him. I gave her the opportunity to apologize, to change her behavior, to build a real relationship with us. She chose pride over family. That's not on me. A year later, we found out we were expecting our first child. Ethan was over the moon, immediately starting to plan the nursery and research the best strollers. I was excited, but also apprehensive about how his family would react to the news. We decided to announce it at a family barbecue at Ethan's father's house. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Hugs, congratulations, and excited chatter about becoming grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Ethan's father pulled us both into a bear hug. This baby is so lucky to have you two as parents, he said, tears in his eyes. Later that week, Carol called. Ethan answered, and I could hear her voice through the phone, even from across the room. I heard about the baby, she said. Yes, Ethan replied cautiously. I want to be involved. That depends entirely on you, Ethan told her. If you can treat Olivia with respect and acknowledge that she's my wife and the mother of your grandchild, then we can talk about visits. But I won't expose our child to the kind of treatment you've shown Olivia. I never meant, Mom, I have a recording of exactly what you meant. We both know what you said and what you intended. The question is whether you're willing to change. There was a long pause. What would I need to do? She asked finally. Start with an apology, a real one, not an excuse or justification. Then we can discuss boundaries and expectations going forward. 2 weeks later, Carol showed up at our front door with a bouquet of flowers and a letter. She looked smaller, somehow less intimidating than she had in the past. I wrote this out because I wanted to make sure I said it right, she began, her voice shaking slightly. The letter was 3 pages long and addressed to both of us. In it, she acknowledged the pain she'd caused, took responsibility for her behavior, and apologized for the things she'd said about me and my family. She didn't make excuses or try to justify her actions. She simply owned them. I was wrong, she said after reading it aloud. I let my own insecurities and prejudices blind me to who you really are, Olivia. You make my son happy in a way I've never seen before. And instead of celebrating that, I tried to destroy it. I'm ashamed of myself. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still undertones of self-pity and defensiveness, but it was a start. More importantly, her behavior began to change. She asked about my work with genuine interest. She complimented the improvements we'd made to our house. She even asked my mother, Nancy, for her sweet potato casserole recipe. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. There were still moments when her old patterns emerged. Subtle criticisms disguised as concerns, attempts to impose her preferences on our decisions. But now, Ethan recognized them immediately and shut them down. Mom, that's the old behavior we talked about, he'd say calmly. Let's try that again with respect. And surprisingly, she would. She'd pause, take a breath, and rephrase her comment in a more appropriate way. It was like watching someone learn a new language. Awkward and imperfect, but showing genuine effort. Our daughter was born on a sunny Tuesday morning in May. Sophia Aliner, named after Ethan's grandmother and my great-aunt Lucille. When Carol met her granddaughter for the first time, she cried. She's beautiful, she whispered, holding Sophia with trembling hands. She looks like Ethan did when he was born. Over the following months, Carol slowly earned back a place in our lives. She babysat Sophia occasionally, always following our rules and schedules without complaint. She brought thoughtful gifts, board books, soft toys, practical items we actually needed. She even invited my parents, David and Nancy, over for dinner, making an effort to get to know them as individuals rather than dismissing them as those people. It wasn't the relationship I'd once hoped for, but it was respectful and functional. More importantly, it was honest. We all knew where we stood with each other, and Sophia would grow up seeing healthy boundaries in action. The real test came when Sophia was 6 months old and Ethan got a promotion at work. The firm was throwing a celebration dinner, and spouses were invited. It was exactly the kind of event where Carol used to make subtle comments about appropriate behavior and social expectations. "Are you nervous?" Ethan asked as we got ready. "A little," I admitted. "This is the first time your mother will see me in action at one of your work events." "You'll be fine," he said, straightening his tie. "You're amazing at these things. You always have been." At the dinner, I watched Carol watching me as I chatted with Ethan's colleagues and their wives. I saw her take note of my dress, my conversation topics, my interactions with the partners. But instead of looking for flaws to criticize later, she seemed genuinely impressed. "You were wonderful tonight," she said as we were leaving. "Ethan's colleagues clearly respect you, and I can see why. You have a gift for making people feel comfortable." It was the first genuine compliment she'd ever given me, and it meant more than I'd expected. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." In the car on the way home, Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not just for tonight, but for everything. For standing up to her when it mattered. For setting boundaries that forced all of us to be better. For giving her a chance to change when she finally asked for one." "We all had things to learn," I said. "Maybe. But you were the one brave enough to start the conversation." Last month at Sophia's first birthday party, I watched Carol playing with her granddaughter in the backyard. She was pointing out flowers and butterflies, her voice soft and patient in a way I'd never heard before. Sophia giggled and clapped her hands, completely comfortable with her grandmother. "She's different with Sophia than she was with us," Ethan observed, coming up beside me. "Sometimes it takes a new generation to break old patterns," I said. "Sophia will never know the version of your mother that I met. She'll only know the grandmother who learned to love without conditions. Do you think that's fair that Sophia gets the better version?" I considered this carefully. I think it's exactly what's supposed to happen. We went through the hard part, so Sophia doesn't have to. We fought the battle so she could have peace. Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there watching our daughter take her first steps across the lawn. Carol cheering her on with genuine delight. "Do you ever miss her?" Ethan asked suddenly. "The version of my mother who existed before all this." "You mean the version who smiled to my face while planning my divorce behind my back?" I asked. "Not really. This version, the one who had to confront her own behavior and choose to change. She's actually better, more honest, more real. Even though it took a public humiliation to get there. Sometimes that's what it takes." I said, "Some people only change when the cost of staying the same becomes too high." As if she'd heard us talking about her. Carol looked over and smiled. Not the fake calculating smile I remembered from before, but something warmer and more genuine. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. I nodded back, accepting her gratitude. We'd come a long way from that bridal shower, from that recording, from the woman who had called my family trailer trash. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been quick, but we'd built something better from the ashes of what came before. That night, after the guest had gone home, and Sophia was asleep in her crib, Ethan and I sat on our front porch swing, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the fireflies dance in our garden. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said suddenly. "What's that?" "I found something when I was cleaning out my old room at Dad's house." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. "It's a letter my mom wrote to herself when I was born about the kind of grandmother she wanted to be someday." I looked at the photo of handwritten words on cream-colored stationery. Even in the dim porch light, I could make out phrases like unconditional love and always supportive and never judgmental. She wanted to be the opposite of her own mother, Ethan explained. "My grandmother was difficult, critical, controlling, impossible to please. Mom swore she'd never be like that, but she became exactly what she'd promised not to be." I said softly, "Until you forced her to see it, the recording, the public confrontation. It wasn't just about accountability. It was about showing her who she'd become versus who she'd wanted to be." I thought about this for a moment. Maybe that's why the apology was real. She wasn't just sorry for hurting us. She was sorry for disappointing herself. Do you think that makes it better? The fact that she had good intentions originally. I think it makes it more complicated, I said. But also more hopeful. People who genuinely want to be better usually can be if they're willing to do the work. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling in for the night. A dog barking in the distance, the hum of air conditioners, the gentle creak of our porch swing. I have something to confess, I said eventually. What's that? I still have dreams, sometimes about that day at the bridal shower. About pressing play on that recording. In the dreams, I'm terrified. My hands are shaking. My voice is breaking. And I keep thinking I'm making a terrible mistake. Do you regret it? In the dreams? No. Even in the dreams, I know it's the right thing to do. But I'm scared of how it will change everything. And are you scared of how it changed everything? I looked around at our life, our house, our garden, our sleeping daughter, Sophia, our honest relationships. No, it changed everything for the better. But I think I'll always remember how terrifying it was to stand up for myself, that completely. You know what I remember most about that day? Ethan asked. What? Coming home and finding you in the kitchen making dinner like nothing had happened. You just blown up my family's entire dynamic, exposed decades of toxic behavior, and fundamentally changed the course of all our relationships. And there you were, making spaghetti and humming to yourself. I laughed at the memory. I was stress cooking. I made enough food for 10 people. But you seemed so calm, so sure of yourself. I was anything but calm. I was terrified that I'd gone too far, that you'd choose your mother over me, that I destroyed any chance of having a normal family relationship. But you did it anyway, because the alternative was spending the rest of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't, accepting treatment I didn't deserve, and watching our future children learn that love comes with conditions. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from that. You were doing your best with the tools you had, I said. Your normal was so different from mine that you couldn't see how toxic it was, but you learned. We both did. A year later, when Sophia took her first steps at a family barbecue, the entire extended family was there to cheer her on. Carol was front and center with her phone out, recording every wobbling step and squealing with delight. She's going to be walking before she's one, Carol exclaimed to anyone who would listen. Just like her daddy, I watched this scene with a mixture of joy and amazement. The grandmother, Sophia, was getting to know bore almost no resemblance to the woman who had made my life miserable for 2 years. This version was supportive, encouraging, and genuinely thrilled by her granddaughter's achievements. Later, as we were cleaning up, Carol approached me with a serious expression. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. What is it? I've been thinking a lot about that recording, about the things I said, and I realized something. I waited for her to continue. I was describing my own worst fears about myself. When I called your family those people, I was really afraid that's what people said about me growing up. When I criticized your job, I was insecure about my own lack of career. When I questioned your worthiness for Ethan, I was really questioning whether I was a good enough mother to have raised a son worth loving. Her honesty caught me off guard. That's very insightful. I spent so much energy trying to prove I belonged in the social circles I'd married into that I forgot what actually mattered. I forgot that the point isn't to impress other people. It's to love your family well. What made you realize that? Carol looked over at Sophia, who was toddling around the yard with her cousins, watching you with her. You never worry about whether you're doing things the right way socially. You just focus on what's best for Sophia. You're confident in your parenting because you're confident in your love for her. It's not that simple. I said, I worry all the time about whether I'm making the right choices. But you don't worry about what other people think of your choices. That's the difference. I spent 30 years parenting based on what would look good to outsiders, rather than what was actually good for Ethan. This conversation stayed with me for weeks. It made me realize that Carol's journey toward change was more complex than I'd understood. She wasn't just learning to treat me better. She was learning to treat herself better, too. The recording that had seemed like such a weapon at the time had become something else entirely. It was evidence of transformation, proof that people can fundamentally change if they're willing to confront their own darkness. 2 years after that first birthday party, we welcomed our second child, a son we named Henry, after Ethan's grandfather. When Carol met her grandson for the first time, she held him with the same reverence she'd shown Sophia, but with an additional layer of wisdom earned through experience. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They both are. You and Ethan are such wonderful parents." As I watched her with our children, I sometimes thought about that woman from the recording, the one who had been so afraid of losing control that she'd been willing to destroy her son's happiness to maintain it. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime, someone we'd all grown beyond. But I never forgot her completely. She served as a reminder of how far we'd all come, and of how important it is to choose love over fear, acceptance over control, and growth over pride. The recording still exists somewhere in my cloud storage, though I haven't listened to it in years. Sometimes I think about deleting it, but then I remember that it's not just evidence of Carol's lowest moment. It's also evidence of my highest one. The moment I decided to stop accepting less than I deserved and started fighting for the family I wanted to build. That fight changed all of us for the better. Ethan learned to set boundaries with his mother and prioritize his own family. Carol learned to love without conditions and to see past her own insecurities. And I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Our children will grow up in a family where love doesn't come with a checklist, where acceptance isn't conditional on meeting someone else's expectations, and where honest communication is valued over polite pretense. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. Sometimes progress requires confrontation, and sometimes the only way to build something better is to be willing to tear down what isn't working. The day I played that recording was the day our real family story began.